The year was 1865, a time of great hardship in Jamaica. The island was still a British colony, and even though slavery had ended about 30 years earlier, true freedom felt very far away for the black population. In the parish of St. Thomas in the east, people were living in very difficult conditions. They worked on sugar plantations for very low wages, often struggling to feed their families. The land they were allowed to farm was often poor, making it nearly impossible to grow enough food. This period was marked by widespread poverty and a deep sense of injustice that simmered just below the surface of daily life. Leading the call for change was a man named Paul Bogle. He was a Baptist deacon from Stony Gut, a small village in the hills. Bogle was not just a church leader. He was a community organizer who felt the pain of his people deeply. He saw the unfairness all around him, from the low pay to the lack of access to good land. He believed that something had to be done to improve the lives of his fellow Jamaicans. Alongside him, though working more through political channels, was George William Gordon, a wealthy mixed-race politician who used his position in the House of Assembly to speak out against the island's unjust laws and the governor's harsh policies. The problems were not just about money or land. They were also about basic human rights. The courts were deeply unfair. The magistrates, who were mostly white planters, almost always sided with the plantation owners in any dispute. If a worker complained about their wages, they would likely lose the case and might even be punished for speaking up. Black Jamaicans had no voice in the government and no way to seek justice through the legal system. This lack of a fair hearing created a feeling of complete helplessness and desperation among the people, who felt trapped in a system designed to keep them poor and powerless. This frustration reached a boiling point due to several specific events. A long drought had ruined many small farms, making the existing poverty even worse. At the same time, the price of imported goods was high, while the wages for plantation labor remained pitifully low. People felt squeezed from all sides, with no relief in sight. Paul Bogle and his followers decided that they could no longer wait for the government to help them. They believed they had to take action themselves to demand the justice they were so consistently denied, setting the stage for a confrontation that would forever change the course of Jamaican history. The immediate trigger for the rebellion came from a simple court case. A man from Stony Gut was found guilty of trespassing on a long-abandoned plantation. The people felt this was a completely unjust ruling, another example of the courts favoring the wealthy landowners over the poor. When Paul Bogle and his supporters went to the court to protest this decision, a fight broke out. Warrants were then issued for the arrest of Bogle and 27 of his men for rioting. This was the final straw for a community that had already endured so much. They saw it as a direct attack on their right to stand up against injustice. On October 11, 1865, Paul Bogle led a group of several hundred protesters on a march from their village of Stony Gut to the Morant Bay courthouse. They were not just a disorganized mob. They were a determined group of men and women seeking a fair hearing for their grievances. They carried sticks and farming tools, but their primary goal was to make their voices heard by the authorities. They wanted to confront the parish officials, known as the vestry, who were meeting at the courthouse that day. Their march was a powerful statement that they would no longer suffer in silence and were demanding to be treated with dignity and respect. As the protesters arrived at the courthouse, they were met by a small armed volunteer militia. The local official, Custos Maximilian von Kettelhot, read the Riot Act, which was a formal order for the crowd to disperse. The protesters, however, refused to back down. They had walked for miles to have their voices heard and were not going to be turned away by a warning. Tensions escalated quickly, and someone in the crowd threw a stone. The militia responded by firing into the group of protesters, killing 7 people instantly and sparking chaos. The protesters, now filled with rage and grief, fought back against the militia. They overpowered the small force and set fire to the courthouse. In the ensuing violence, the Custos and several other parish officials and planters were killed. The rebellion had begun, born out of a peaceful protest that was met with deadly force. The events of that day were a tragic explosion of years of pent-up frustration and anger. The people had tried to use peaceful means to seek justice, but when they were met with bullets, the situation spiraled into a violent and desperate fight for their rights and their lives. The news of the uprising in Morant Bay reached the governor of Jamaica, Edward John Eyre, who responded with extreme and overwhelming force. Governor Eyre declared martial law in the parish of St. Thomas in the East, which essentially suspended all normal laws and gave the military complete control. He saw the rebellion not as a desperate cry for justice from an oppressed people, but as a full-scale conspiracy to overthrow British rule on the island. His reaction was not aimed at restoring order, but at inflicting a brutal and terrifying punishment on the black population to make an example of them. Under the authority of martial law, soldiers were sent into the parish with orders to crush the rebellion without mercy. What followed was a month-long reign of terror. Soldiers, including the infamous Maroons from Moortown who were called upon by the government, hunted down anyone suspected of being involved in the protest. They burned down villages, including Stony Gut, destroying over 1,000 homes and leaving countless families homeless. The military's actions were not just about finding the leaders of the rebellion, they were about terrorizing the entire community into submission and ensuring that no one would ever dare to challenge the colonial authorities again. The official numbers of the crackdown are horrifying and reveal the scale of the government's brutality. In the weeks that followed the protest, 439 people were officially executed, many of them after very quick trials with no real chance to defend themselves. An additional 600 people, including pregnant women, were flogged with whips and cat-o'-nine-tails, a cruel and torturous punishment. The violence was widespread and indiscriminate, creating an atmosphere of pure fear across the parish. Governor Eyre's response was not justice. It was a massacre designed to reassert colonial dominance through sheer, unadulterated terror. Paul Bogle was captured and hanged on October 24, 1865. Just outside the burned-out courthouse where the protest had taken place. George William Gordon, who was not even in Morant Bay during the protest, was also arrested. Governor Eyre considered Gordon the true mastermind behind the rebellion because of his political activism. Gordon was taken from Kingston, where martial law was not in effect, to Morant Bay, where he could be tried by a military court. He was quickly found guilty on flimsy evidence and executed on October 23rd. Their deaths were meant to silence the voices of dissent permanently. The Morant Bay Rebellion and Governor Eyre's savage response sent shockwaves all the way back to Britain. While many in England praised Eyre as a hero who had saved the colony, others were horrified by the brutality. A royal commission was sent to Jamaica to investigate the events. The commission concluded that while Eyre had acted promptly to stop the rebellion, the punishments he inflicted were excessive and cruel. As a result, Governor Eyre was recalled from his post in Jamaica, though he was never criminally punished for his actions, which many viewed as a grave injustice. One of the most significant long-term consequences of the rebellion was the change in Jamaica's system of government. Fearing that the black population might gain more political power, the British government used the rebellion as an excuse to dissolve the Jamaican House of Assembly. This assembly, while flawed and dominated by planters, had been a form of elected representation for over 200 years. It was replaced with a crown colony system, meaning Jamaica would now be ruled directly by a governor appointed by Britain. This move took away the little political power Jamaicans had and concentrated it entirely in the hands of the British, setting back the island's path to self-governance. Despite the tragic outcome and the political setback, the memory of the Morant Bay Rebellion endured as a powerful symbol of resistance. The fight for justice, though brutally crushed, was never forgotten. The story of Paul Bogle and his followers became a source of inspiration for future generations of Jamaicans who continued the struggle for equality, workers' rights, and national independence. The rebellion highlighted the deep injustices of the colonial system and served as a stark reminder of the high price that was paid in the long walk toward freedom and self-determination for the Jamaican people. Today, Paul Bogle and George William Gordon are revered as two of Jamaica's 7 national heroes. Their sacrifice is honored, and their stories are taught to every Jamaican child. They represent the unwavering courage to stand up against oppression, even in the face of impossible odds. The Morant Bay Rebellion is remembered not as a failure, but as a crucial moment in the nation's history. A bloody and painful, yet vital step on the journey toward a more just and independent Jamaica. It stands as a testament to the enduring spirit of a people who would not accept injustice as their fate.